and get right to it. So let's see. Share the screen. Share the screen. All right. How's that look? Pretty good? I need a little thumbs up if you can see my PowerPoint. Fantastic. Okay, cool. Thanks, guys. I appreciate that. Okay, so let's talk about where we were last time. We talked about, sorry, not there. Go back, go back. Trying to make your guys' little faces bigger so I can see if there's questions or anything. That's better. All right, so regulation of urine. Last time we talked about this weird little thing called renin, and renin stimulating angiotensin 1 and angiotensin 1 becoming angiotensin 2. I tried to show you a YouTube video. YouTube wouldn't load, so I ended up just posting the YouTube video for you. Not the easiest thing to understand, not by a long shot, but it's a little more visual than just the word renin. So, you know, that's something, I guess. Aldosterone is one I would like you to know. It's very, very common hormone. And so aldosterone is what's going to have you absorb a lot more water and decrease that amount of urine output. And so you're saving that fluid and you're increasing your blood pressure. Antidiuretic hormone is where we left off. We talked about a diuretic is like caffeine, something that makes you urinate more. So antidiuretic is going against the urination. So it's a hormone that makes you not pee. And we already talked about that. So both aldosterone and antidiuretic hormone are doing the same job. Antidiuretic hormone often goes by just the name ADH. So if you don't want to memorize antidiuretic hormone, you know ADH, I'm happy with that. So both those hormones, same job. And that's where we left off. So here's a weird one. Atrial, which tells you where it's coming from, natriuretic factor. The atrial natriuretic factor is actually a chemical that's going to be released from your heart, which really is maybe too much for me to honestly understand, if I'm being completely honest, but released by the right atrium of your heart when your blood pressure is too high. Your right atrium can sense this. And this is a little bit different because with ADH, for example, and aldosterone, you sense the blood pressure was high, you told the hypothalamus in your brain, the hypothalamus told your pituitary gland made a hormone, and the hormone was released all throughout your body. So you're like, oh, that kind of makes sense, right? Like the brain regulates everything. So you get a messenger who tells the brain what's going on, and the brain makes decisions based off that. So that's like, you know, it's confusing, but I kind of like conceptually get that. Atrial natriuretic factor is different because it's like the heart talks straight to your kidney. What are you doing? Can you cut an orange without cutting yourself?
I already cut myself.
Oh, well then don't cut an orange. Do goldfish or something easier.
Goldfish.
Sorry. It's a great answer. I already cut myself. Well, I keep going, I guess. I don't know. I don't know. Anyways, so sorry. Atrial natriuretic factor is different because here we have the heart communicating directly to the kidney. Like there's no brain intermediator. It's like heart tells the kidney to do something, and just that is like too much for my tiny brain to really truly conceptualize, but that's pretty cool. So your blood pressure is too high, then you're going to go ahead and create that atrial natriuretic factor. Your right atrium will release that, and you're going to reduce the amount of water you reabsorb into your capillaries. So if you reduce reabsorption, then more fluid gets to the collecting duct. So we are actually going to increase the amount of pee you're making if your blood pressure is too high. You urinate more, fluid levels drop, blood pressure decreases, your heart stops secreting atrial natriuretic factor, and you're back in homeostasis. And so that would be kind of the opposite of ADH and aldosterone would be atrial natriuretic factor. And so that's a cool thing. So ADH and aldosterone work together to make you not pee, and then atrial natriuretic factor works against that to make you pee a lot more. And those are really the only hormones. If you guys know renin to angiotensin and ADH, aldosterone, and atrial natriuretic factor, that's it for physiology. I think that's a pretty decent accomplishment for, you know, 17, 18-year-old kid. So I'd say that's pretty good physiology for kidney regulation and homeostasis. There is one that's kind of almost old news to you guys, like way back in the nervous system. Seems like forever ago we talked about the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. Parasympathetic nervous system is everything's cool, you're relaxed, lots of blood flow goes to digestive organs, you digest meals, you're not environmentally stressed. And the sympathetic nervous system is what kicks in during fight or flight, adrenaline fueled experiences, like being chased by the bear is always the example we use. So, you know, when we're talking about epinephrine and norepinephrine, pupils dilate, respiratory rate increases, heart rate increases, you're having this adrenaline rush. And so when that happens, this is probably not surprising to you, but your sympathetic nervous system will actually cause constriction in the arteries leading to your kidneys, okay? You'll vasodilate arteries leading to your muscles, because if we're running from the bear or fighting the bear or starting a basketball or volleyball game that we're particularly nervous about and our heart rate's going crazy, it's very important that our brain and our muscles get tons of oxygen. But as far as your kidneys making pee at the correct pace, like that can wait till later. So you shut down, that's not really true. You slow down digestion and filtration for urine. We don't need all that blood going to the kidney right now. We need all that blood in our muscles because our environment's about to get weird and we're about to run from a bear or be in a basketball game. So whatever, we need like a lot of blood to the muscles and not so much to the kidneys. So sympathetic nervous system's the adrenaline rush. We constrict the arteries to the kidneys. We send less and less blood to the kidneys because we want to put that blood in the heart, lungs, and muscles so we can run from this bear. And so obviously if you do that, you're going to produce less urine, right? No duh. If less blood goes to your kidneys, less filtrate is pushed out of that plasma, less urine overall will be produced. So does that kind of make sense, like conceptually? Everybody good with that? Anybody have any questions on that? No? Cool. All right, perfect. That's good. Nobody starts a basketball game or a football game or something where they're just filled with adrenaline and they're like, I have to pee so bad. You know, when you're filled with adrenaline, you're like, oh, I need to go to the bathroom. You know, I'm nervous about this sporting event or whatever gives you adrenaline rush. Giving a speech, I guess. I don't know, something like that. So some other stuff that's not really that new. You already know this, but blood is basically about 7.4. Pardon me. You have a very, very limited range of tolerance for pH of your blood. You learn that back in the cardiovascular system. If your pH drops too low, that's called acidosis, which literally means, you're becoming more acidic. That is a very, very, very dangerous thing. It can be life-threatening. If your pH gets too high, above that 7.45, that's called alkalosis, and it's just as dangerous. You already learned this in the cardiovascular system, but you have a buffer system called bicarbonate ions that can take those changes in pH in your blood and buffer those changes, which is cool because I can drink acidic coffee all day and not die of toxic acidosis. The bicarbonate just neutralizes those acids, and then it'll work the same way with the CO2 from like the soda pop stuff. It can become carbonic acid in solution, and the CO2 from your muscles becomes carbonic acid as well, and that bicarbonate can neutralize that. So that is a very important thing, and we don't want to forget that as we look at creating essentially urine. There's a big part of regulating the pH of our blood based on what we draw out with our kidneys. And so those two guys, kidneys and the bloodstream, they're like best buds. Okay, so that's really not new, I don't think. If you want to write it down, you sure can. But acidosis, you're acidic; alkalosis, you're basic. Works for soil, works for kidneys. I see a couple folks writing, so I'm just going to kind of hang out. All right. I think most everybody's done writing, so let's move on. Okay, so let's get out of the kidney. We've been in the kidney for a week. Let's get out of the kidney. Okay, so this is a really cool diagram. Obviously, here's your kidneys, they're retroperitoneal. Here is what would that be? Hepatic flexure of the large intestine? I don't know. It's your large intestine, right? Turning this corner and becoming transverse colon, right? And so tucked in behind this guy, the reason they left that little part of that large intestine is to show that the kidney is tucked in behind that large intestine. And so what's going to happen here is we've got, just a huge renal vein, a renal artery, and then they're branching off in a bunch of other arteries you already learned about. This weird little kind of fat looking thing right there, okay, that's the gland on top of your kidneys that's making epinephrine, and that's called your adrenal gland, and so that's going to be secreting all the hormones that we were talking about, aldosterone, ADH, those kinds of things. Sorry, I'm having a hard time writing and talking at the same time. All right, now where we're going to kind of put our focus is if we could remove that artery and vein right there, you'd see a white tube. You can see just the end of it right there. And that white tube is this guy right here coming down. Okay, there he is. All right, that's called your ureter. And that's how we're going to, at this point where we're done reclaiming salts and water, and it's definitely waste, it's definitely urine, that's where it's going to go. And that ureter is going to drop all the way down. I hate to draw on it because it's such a pretty picture, but I'm going to draw on it all the way down, all the way down, all the way down into your pelvis, your pelvic cavity. And then this right here is the top of your urinary bladder. Okay, this is the rectum. And so the ureter is kind of snaking its way down behind the rectum, and it is actually going to go, I think this is a weird design, but who am I to judge? So if this is your bladder and this is your kidney takes a ureter down to the bladder, right? It doesn't drop into the top of the bladder and like drip urine in like a leaky sink slowly. Your ureter actually goes behind your bladder and inserts from the bottom. And then urine flows down and is like pushed in from the bottom, which I think is like, that's so crazy. Why don't you just drop it in from the top? I don't know. I didn't make the thing. It does a great job, so I can't really, knock it or anything, but that's a ureter. A ureter is the tube that transports urine from your kidneys to your urinary bladder. It's a little white tube on that diagram. They do come right out of the renal pelvis. You've already seen that, like little calyces lead to a pelvis. The pelvis, is like little tubes getting to a larger tube, and then the pelvis all comes down to this big tube called a ureter. And the ureter will meet your bladder inferiorly, which means it will like go behind the bladder and come back up, make a little U, and insert on the bottom of the bladder and push urine in to the bottom of that bladder. So I think it's an odd design, but it sure works great. So, why not? Cool picture. So there's, and the reason we make that point is because this picture makes it look like the ureters are entering from the top of the bladder. And I don't want you to get that misconception that ureter is actually kind of, if we did dotted lines for what we can't see, right? He's coming down here and he's going to insert like right there. And this guy is going to insert right there. So that fluid comes down and then is pushed into the bottom of that urinary bladder. So here's the easy diagram you guys did. Kidneys at the top, ureter is the tube, bladder holds it until there's a convenient time to get rid of this urine, and then the urethra is the hollow tube that takes urine from the urinary bladder to outside of the body. Easy peasy. Pretty simple system, right? Except for that it's not that simple. So ureter structure is a pretty simple tube. It's like a lot of the tubes you've already learned about. There's not a ton of surface area because we're not dealing with absorption here. It's just mucus lined and straight down to the bladder. That's it. So the inner layer is a mucus layer. You want to be sure to protect those cells from any sort of acidic or dangerous things that could potentially be coming out of the kidney in that urine. So we're going to protect those cells that make up that ureter from urea, from uric acid, those kinds of things. And so you have a mucus layer to protect it. The middle layer is smooth muscle. And oddly enough, it can actually do peristalsis, which is crazy because peristalsis, you guys know, is like the muscular contractions down the tube that push food through your digestive system. And then here we sit with urine, with like a gravity-fed system where the kidneys are higher than the bladder. And one would think, like, can it just kind of flow and do its thing? But you might remember from that video we watched, that UPJ obstruction video, where the surgeon says, oh, you can see it. Look, this is great. It's pushing a bolus of urine. Which, a bolus is like a formed body, like a bolus of food is the part of the food you've decided to swallow at this point. That's when your food becomes a bolus before it becomes digested. And so this bolus of urine idea is that the kidney can actually kind of contract to push out a volume of urine, and then your ureter, even though it has gravity as its friend, can also kind of contract like the wave and push that bolus of urine down into the bladder. So strange. It seems strange, but I'm sure there's a reason that I'm just not smart enough to know. That wouldn't surprise me at all. And then the outer layer is made of fibrous connective tissue. Probably not a surprise to you. There's fibrous connective tissue between our muscles and our skin, and there's connective tissue between organs and fat, and it's like what's on the outside of everything, some sort of connective tissue, right? So there's nothing too shocking there, I suppose. But here's a cool thing. At the junction where your ureter meets your bladder is basically a mucous membrane that's like a one-way check valve. And this is pretty handy. So this lets the urine go from the ureter to the bladder, but not go from the bladder to the ureter. So you can't backflow up this system. And I'm sure there's a few advantages to this, but just think about it for a minute. Why do you think it's beneficial to have a one-directional flow of urine and not allow back pressure, backup, backflow?
You don't explode.
So you don't explode. That's true, John. If you're going for that long car trip to Nebraska and you're like, we're not stopping until we're there, kids. We don't want your kidneys to explode from the pressure. That could be a good idea. Any other ideas? Because there's a couple, I think that it's probably pretty smart to have this. What's that?
Urine infection.
Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of. Good thought. That's the one I was thinking of. It's kind of funny because I have headphones on, but it's like my instinct to lean in when you're in the classroom. So I just leaned into my computer. So dumb. Okay, that's my thought exactly, John. Yeah, so like you think about it, it's kind of a weird thing to think about, but your kidneys, the inside of the kidneys, probably sterile, right? No bacteria in the thing. The ureter, probably sterile. No bacteria in it. Bladder, maybe sterile, hopefully sterile, right? And there's no bacteria in the thing, but the urethra, right, is going to lead to the outside world. So anything that contacts air, is going to have bacteria in it. And so there's a chance you get bacteria in the urethra and you could get a urinary tract infection, which I'm sure would probably be very inconvenient. But that urinary tract infection, if it were to work its way up to your bladder, would be very bad and very dangerous. And if it were to make it through that one-way check valve and make it up into your ureter and give you, an infection in your kidneys, then we'd be talking about something that's fatal, right? I'm sure a urinary tract infection is not fun. I don't know, but I'm assuming it's not. But I doubt it's going to kill you, right? I hope not. I don't know. This is going on YouTube. I shouldn't say stuff like that. I'm not a doctor. Don't sue me. But like if you got a bacterial infection in your kidneys, like that could be it. So having that one-way flow to prevent bacterial or any sort of infections from getting back up into your internal organs, it seems like a logical reason for me. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. Don't sue me. It's going on YouTube. I got to remember that. The worst part about putting my videos on YouTube? Next chapter is reproductive system. I don't want to put that on YouTube. There's some, I'm comfortable having the discussions, but there's some discussions I don't really want to put on YouTube. That's one of them.
You can make them private and then just post the link to a Mototor, only we can access them.
Perfect. I like that idea. But the good thing? We have 4 weeks of school left, and we might make it to embryological development. That's pretty cool. I've only taught that one time in 6 years. So if we make that, it's really fun. So I'm kind of like, it's the good and the bad of quarantine or whatever you call this. virus nonsense. So let's go to the bladder. How much time do we have left? We doing okay? We're doing okay. All right. I'm going to try to let you guys go a little bit early today because I feel like with my 3-minute video, I went over my 30-minute time, and I do my very best to be obedient to that. So a urinary bladder is a big hollow muscular organ. It is literally just a muscular circle, right? That's it. You guys actually saw a urinary bladder when we watched the How to Build a Beating Heart video, and they like regrew that kid's bladder. I don't know if you remember that or not, but they made like a scaffold and then they like put cells all over it and regrew this kid's bladder. So it is expandable, which is cool. So when it's empty, the bladder will actually shrink down. And as you kind of, let's say you're on that long road trip, you hold it and hold it and hold it, it will swell a little and stretch a little. And there are baroreceptors, which are pressure receptors, and stretch receptor cells. You don't have to memorize that, but basically when your bladder holds more urine, it gets stretched out and puts pressure on cells, and it gets heavier. And these cells will send a nervous signal to your brain that says, you have to pee. You should go pee now. Now, bear in mind that you're like nowhere near a full bladder, right? Like when at the point where you're like, I'm almost in pain because I have to urinate so bad. Your bladder is probably between 1/3 and 1/2 full. Isn't that odd? Yeah, it's kind of weird, right? So what I think the reason for that, I might be wrong, but I think the reason for that is if you were to get your bladder full, right? Like to capacity, that thing is maxed out. You're going to be putting more weight and more pressure on those one-way check valves, and urine is going to have a more difficult time going from the ureters to the bladder, and it's going to be kind of pushing against those one-way check valves, trying to get back into the ureter. And so to prevent that pressure, we as humans are urinating so frequently and nearly emptying a bladder that's only 1/3 full, right? And so I think it's a pretty cool design, but it seems strange. Like, why can't we just hold it and fill it up, but we don't. Your capacity is probably about a pint. Bear in mind that everybody's different. I would imagine a 6.5-foot guy and a 5.5-foot guy or a 4.5-foot guy would probably, they have different sized skulls and different length arms. They probably have different sized bladders. That would be my guess. But if you need to let that bladder stretch, you can easily hold twice that. And so 2 pints, I don't know what that would be, but I know what 1,000 milliliters is. That's 1 liter, which is pretty. Like, that's a lot. I don't measure it, but I mean, a liter? I mean, you guys know what a liter of soda looks like, right? So a 2-liter pop, just take half of that. That's a lot. That's a lot of urine. I think that's really something, but there you have it. That's kind of pushing it. Here's the design of this bladder. It's going to be not surprising to you. The inside, no duh, is lined with mucus. The middle, no duh, is lined with muscle. And the outside, no duh, is lined with connective tissue. So it's, I've never seen that design before, right? Down the ureters come and they enter at the bottom. You see this guy right here? That is where the ureter is entering into the bottom of that bladder. It's probably got some cool name like internal ureter orifice or something like that, but I don't know it off the top of my head. And so the ureter comes down, inserts at the bottom of the bladder. Urine leaks into the bladder, into this little area called a trigone. 1, 2, 3 sides to a triangle. The trigone is the triangle of holes in your bladder, and it goes ureter, ureter, urethra. Urethra is the tube that's going to take this stuff out of the body and to the toilet. And the 2 holes for the ureters is where the urine comes in. And so the urine kind of drips in here till this thing gets about 1/3 full. That puts enough pressure on these walls to sort of stretch them out and make you uncomfortable and give you the need to urinate, okay? And then there's an internal sphincter here that is not under voluntary control. There's an external sphincter that's under voluntary control. And so if you hold it and hold it and hold it, eventually the internal sphincter will open and you're going to have to go to the bathroom very, very, very badly. And then you will go to the bathroom and the external sphincter will open, and then it just flows. Pretty much gravity fed from there, but there is a muscle, 2 muscles, that can kind of contract a little bit to aid this out, but it's mostly gravity fed. So I told you guys we were going to shut this off early, and it is 28. So I'm going to ask for questions, and then we're going to call it. Any questions for me? No? No? Not seeing any questions? Okay. Everybody knows way more about bladders than they hoped to on the average Thursday morning, but here we sit. So tomorrow, no Zoom meeting. I'll put your video on Edmodo. Have an awesome weekend. It's finally going to be warm out, and I will see you guys Monday, okay? All right. See you guys. Thanks a lot. I appreciate your time. Appreciate your attendance, and have an awesome weekend.
Thank you.
You, Mr. Sucker.